stand up. Any of this?
All right. Well, hello, everybody.
Hello.
It's episode 2 of Goddess Bible Study. I'm just waiting to see if it goes live here on the old YouTubers. All right, we are. Very good. We are in. All right. So we got some new faces here. We got a new face, John. All right. I'm just going to introduce. I'm Ed Dodge here. This is Goddess Bible Study, episode number 2, I guess. We're going to be talking about Genesis 2, Eve in the Garden of Eden, and how I argue that this is the divorce papers of Asherah and the qedesha priestesses and of the goddess traditions. So let's say hi to everybody. We got Lisa and Tony and Rosalie and John. Maybe John, you want to say hi since you're the new face here? We could all give a quick intro, maybe.
Sure. John. Love learning, love history. Kind of disclosure, I went to an Episcopal seminary, studied to not become a priest. I think, I don't know what to think. So Dad died a few years ago, which got me to think about all these kind of cosmological, existential questions. I think there's something definitely out in the universe. As far as I know, I haven't been dead. So can I tell you what it is? No. But I love learning and love getting, multiple views of things. And so I just want to, explore, keep learning. Been teaching history for God knows how long. I can do a quick plug for the book. My father and his family were interned in World War II as German Americans. So that's my first book, working on more book projects and writing projects now, and journal article too. So I'm passionate about social justice issues and treating all human beings as human beings. So,
all right, well, very good. Welcome to the Bible study here. I think we're just going to jump right into it, and then we'll open up the discussion. I've got a few slides here. Let's see. All right, so as folks know, I wrote History of the Goddess from the Ice Age to the Bible, and in my journey down this rabbit hole of the goddesses in the Bible, the Garden of Eden story is clearly one of the critical stories. And so my basic premise for folks that don't know it is that the first temple, the Israelites were pagans before they became monotheists, and that all the way through the first temple, they were still pagans. It was a polytheistic culture. The God of the Bible was still two separate gods, El and Yahweh. And Baal was the incumbent king of the gods. And so the Yahweh cult leads they were historical people, and they led a very real cultural reform. It was a reformation and a cultural reform that ultimately centralized their religion all around one God, which is Yahweh. But along the way, they had to get rid of the goddesses, and the goddesses were central to the popular culture, central to the people's worldview. It's all about Mother Nature, the cycle of life. And there's 3 goddesses in the Old Testament: Asherah, Astarte, and Anat. And their priestesses are the qedesha, who we're going to talk about tonight. One of the most remarkable things I learned in my studies was that the qedesha priestesses, that the word translates as the holy ones, but that when you see them written in English, that's what the word means in Hebrew. It's called qedesha, and the males are called the qedesh. And the Hebrew definition for that is that they're the holy ones. They're called the holy ones. But when it's translated into the English Bible, they're called the temple prostitutes, and the males are called the temple sodomites. And then they're banned. There's a law against them in the laws of Deuteronomy. It says there shall be no, this is the King James version of it, Deuteronomy 23, 17, and 18. There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel. Thou shalt not bring the hire of a whore or the price of a dog into the house of the Lord thy God for any vow, for even both of these are an abomination unto the Lord thy God. Well, so the whore of the daughters, that's the qedesha priestesses, and the temple sodomites, those guys are they're transgenders. They're like eunuchs and stuff, and they're the transgender people of their day. And that's part of this cross-cultural traditions of the of the mother goddess traditions is you find these eunuchs and trans folks all over the place. You find them all in Rome and all over the place. So no one ever taught me that when I was growing up in church, that the temple prostitutes were the holy ones. So I thought that was very interesting. And so my take on it is, these reforms happened historically, specifically under King Hezekiah, and then King Josiah was the most important one. And these are historical people. King Hezekiah lived around 700 BC. King Josiah was like his grandson or great grandson, and he lived around late 600s BC. He ruled from 640 to 609 BC, and he was a child king. And they had all these great reforms under him. And then it's only shortly while after that, in 586, that the temple is destroyed by the Babylonians and they get sent into exile. So King Josiah is very late in the first temple period, and he's a real guy, and he led these real reforms where they cut down the Asherah poles, which is the sacred pole, like a totem pole for the mother goddess Asherah, and they shut down the temples and they shut down these priestesses and write these laws. That happened historically. And so I think that the Garden of Eden story was written in that time period, generally speaking, to be the mythological summation of what's happening and to symbolically represent how the goddess traditions are being shut down. So we see all this symbolism in the Garden of Eden story. I think everyone knows the Garden of Eden story. We don't think you have to recount the whole thing. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, forbidden fruit. So I've got some quotes here. I trust audience knows the story well enough. Does everyone know the story well enough? We don't need to summarize it all. So all the symbolism can be related to the goddess traditions being inverted. The gardens generally, the serpent absolutely was central to goddess traditions. Sacred plants and plant medicine, midwifery, childbirth, female monogamy, patriarchal rule, all these things are wrapped up in Eve in the Garden of Eden, and they represent this transition of the goddess traditions being shut down. So let me see, so small on my screen here. So Jen, it starts in the beginning. I'm just going to read through some of these. Unless someone has anything to say, any comments quick, or should I read some of the slides? Okay. So now Yahweh God had planted a garden in the east in Eden, and there he put a man he had formed. Yahweh God, it would be the Lord God in English text, but when it says the Lord, I'm translating it as Yahweh. Yahweh God made all the kinds of trees grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the middle of the garden were the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I mean, plant medicine was like central to what the goddesses were doing and the priestesses. Yahweh God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And Yahweh God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of that, you will certainly die." An instruction to not eat the tree of knowledge of good and evil seems like very strange instructions to me. It always struck me as odd since I was a child. And, people have made great hay of why God would not want people to have wisdom about good and evil. So all these are in order, all these quotes. Then Yahweh God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. And the man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." So to have the woman born of the man is obviously an inversion of how things are done normally. It's obviously an inversion of any kind of tradition that would, put the woman in a central position and put motherhood in a central position. This is obviously taking motherhood out of the equation. It's not by accident. It's definitely highly intentional.
Can I mention something, Ed? Is that okay to?
Yeah, you can comment if you got something to say.
Sure. So when I took OT way back when, our professor mentioned, and I, because who reads this stuff carefully? I certainly didn't for a long time. But when we read Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 and then 27, I never noticed this, until I, studied it. And then I always knew the rib story, but then in 1:26, God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion, et cetera, et cetera." And then in 27, so God created humankind in his image, male and female, he created them. And one of the things that struck me was I just had never really read this or read it carefully. And so they're sort of two different, we were taught kind of two different versions of this, right? Because Genesis, you've got these different so-called
Oh,
schools.
right. Yeah. So last week we did Genesis 1.
Oh,
And so that was last week's episode. And yeah, they're clearly two separate creation stories. And they're presented to us in your typical church. And when I was taught it in Sunday school, is that, this is just one big singular story.
right.
But then when you study it, it's quite clear that these are two separate stories. And it doesn't take a huge amount of critical scholarship to see that these are two separate stories. I mean, they did explain it to me as a child in my Sunday school that these were two separate stories.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've always known that, but certainly the evangelicals would teach it that it's one story with these, contradictions, which they then do all their elaborate rhetorical backflips to, iron out all these contradictions that are all over the place in the Bible. But yeah, between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, there's clearly two separate creations of man and woman, written centuries apart by totally different people. So now we get to the serpent. This is really important because the serpent is presented as like this great source of evil. A lot of modern Christians will say it's Satan or the devil. But what's interesting about the serpent is he doesn't ever say anything false. Not one thing that he says is ever untrue. Every single thing he says is accurate. And whereas we're here in the West, we're so accustomed to serpents being as something bad, it was again a revelation for me to learn when I started studying this ancient cultures that for the ancient pagans that the serpents were totally good. And you see them all over Greek culture, which is why we have a snake to this day in our medical symbols, because it goes with shoot, I'm forgetting his name, but there's a couple different Greek important Greek figures that are of medicine that have serpents with them.
Yeah.
You're talking about Hippocrates and the Hippocratic Oath?
There's him, but there's somebody else. The caduceus is the name of the
caduceus is the staff. Yeah. And the two serpents wind around the staff, and then there's wings at the top.
Yeah, and there's one with two serpents. There's two symbols, one with two serpents and one with a single serpent. But they're good. My point being that those symbols are considered good and a symbol of wisdom in Greek culture, but they're inverted in this Garden of Eden story, which is kind of unique. So anyway, now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals Yahweh God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God said you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die." "You will certainly not die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So the sorry, hold on, I got something here. So he says, "You will certainly not die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." One thing I've noticed about the goddess traditions, another revelation, is that they're all cycle of life traditions. And so they embrace death as much as they talk about life. I've got Kali behind me on the wall. It's like there's a lot of meditation on death in goddess traditions that I feel like prepares you to like live right now. But monotheism is very much about immortal life and eternal life and a linear one-way path and not a circular thing. So again, the serpent's not wrong when he says that, or even God's not wrong when they talk about you will die in these traditions. You will die so you can know how to live. And then this next one, this is the exact description of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. So nowhere does it say it's an apple. And that the idea there was an apple comes along in the Middle Ages. I'm not going to get into this tonight, but I've actually make the whole case that this is cannabis, and that cannabis is part of these traditions that's being thrown out. But that's a different topic for another night. We'll do a whole dedicated cannabis topic when we can talk about this first. Then it doesn't really matter which plant it is for tonight. It's just that it's representative of the whole tradition of sacred plants, psychedelics, plant medicine, the entire portfolio of sacred plant medicine is what I think is really being represented here, and what we need to really discuss and think of it in those terms. And in fact, I found this amazing newspaper article. It was in the Washington Post today. It was about Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas, who is now on a crusade for the psychedelic ibogaine to be like a really powerful medicine for PTSD and for soldiers coming back from the wars, and how he used it himself. That he had suffered from some trauma from football injuries and concussions in his childhood, and he had I think he said 3 serious concussions, and he had had issues that had stayed with him his entire life into his political career, and he took ibogaine and it really helped him, and so now he's trying to get it legalized, or at least get it structured so people can have access to it. And there was a quote in there in the article from, I wrote it down somewhere. Hold on, this is so perfect. All right, this is from the newspaper article from today's Washington Post. Conservative religious groups have lobbied against legislation endorsing psychedelic treatment in the past. Tony Perkins, the president of the Family Research Council, said in a statement that although he had not done enough research into ibogaine to have an opinion, and here's the kicker, we have expressed opposition to the use of psychedelics because of long-standing spiritual, theological, and ethical concerns about mind-altering drugs that open individuals to mystical or transcendent experiences that are not in line with orthodox teaching of Scripture. Like, that is a perfect summation of Christians' attitudes towards psychedelics for centuries, with all the witch burning in the Middle Ages and all the way back. And I believe it goes all the way back to this Garden of Eden story in the 6th century BC, when they were shutting down the qedeshas for the first time. They had developed a prejudice against psychedelics and plant medicine at that time. And that these are really old disputes. The disputes over transgender people in public right now, the disputes over cannabis and psychedelics right now, ecology, feminism, all this stuff that's in our today's culture war is part of this old theological disputes over the mother goddess. That's what I find it so interesting. That's what got me hooked about it in the first place, is what I started, because I got into this from studying cannabis in the Bible, and I stumbled into the mother goddess stuff. It was when I realized that how parallel this is to today's culture wars. That everything that the secular left is doing in nightclub culture and LGBTQ culture and sex, drugs, and rock and roll is all, and all the environmentalism is all wrapped up in this old debates over the mother goddess. Let's see. All right, so now they've been busted. God is angry. And God said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" The man said, "The woman the woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it." So just blame the woman, throw her under the bus. Then Yahweh God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" And the woman said, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." But the serpent didn't deceive her. Everything the serpent said was true. And then next one is, so Yahweh God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head and you will strike his heel." So yes, this is where he curses the serpent, who had always been otherwise been elevated. That's another thing that King Hezekiah does in his reforms is he smashes the bronze serpent that Moses had made because, it's the idolatry. We'll have that story another night. So this is where he's punishing Eve. He says, to the woman, he said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. And secondly, your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. So these are two things. One is about childbirth and midwifery. That's one of the main things the qedesha priestesses did, is they were known as midwives. Like that was like one of their primary jobs. And they did plant medicine to assist in midwifery and to assist in childbirth. Cannabis was an important midwifery medicine in those days. Some of the main evidence we have of cannabis as medicine is in a midwifery context in like ancient Egypt. And so when you ban the plant medicine and you put the midwives out of business and tell them you can't make any more plant medicine, it's a way of telling the women your childbearing will be very severe. And then separately says your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. So she has to be monogamous to her husband, but he's given no such instruction to be monogamous to her. Now in a matriarchal culture, part of my thesis is this competition between matriarchal cultures and patriarchal cultures. In the matriarchal cultures, where the bloodlines are tracked through the mother, they're not obligated to monogamy, and you don't have to control women's sex lives. And so part of what's happening in the broader cultural context is this transition to patriarchy, this transition to bringing the women to heel, bringing them into men-controlled families and out of women-controlled families, and forcing them into monogamy, whether they like it or not. With their husbands, but the husbands are not obligated to be monogamous. To Adam, he said, because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you'll eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. Another persistent theme in this part of the Old Testament is like they're really hostile to farmers and farming. Farmers and shepherds is another theme we'll actually get into the next week with Cain and Abel. Farmers and shepherds are not just vocations, they're two different people groups. The shepherds are the shepherd kings, the patriarchal shepherd kings that impose themselves as a new ruling class on the farmers, who are the traditional indigenous peasants, the matriarchal folks in the towns. That's what farmers means symbolically in Mesopotamia and in the Bible. And so the scholars kind of miss it. They just view these as vocations. They don't realize that there's this patriarchal contest going on, and that the farmers represent the matriarchal clans and the shepherds are the patriarchal clans. Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all living. So this is clearly like a mother goddess type reference, an Asherah type reference. The mother of all living is, that's just kind of by definition the mother goddess. This is the last slide, I think. And Yahweh God said, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So Yahweh God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken. After he drove the man out, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. So this is where, he throws them out of the garden and, throws them both out of the garden, and they have now, no longer living a life out. Oh, Asclepius. Oh yeah. Somebody wrote Asclepius in the chats. So that's the last of my slides. I open up the table here to anyone that has anything to say.
Hi. It just occurred to me, I was thinking about Elysius in Athens and how the psilocybin was part of that whole religion. And that went all the way back, 1600 BCE. And it was understood as a sort of death where people went and never came back. And so anyway, it's just interesting to me too, like eat from this fruit and you shall die. And I'm sure they didn't imply this kind of egotistical death, but I'm just looking at it at a whole different way now, thanks,
Yeah. So
about
I think the Eleusinian
psychedelics and
mysteries,
religion.
I think
Yeah.
the Eleusinian mysteries, which was like the most important religion in Greece, and we don't know all the details because it was literally a mystery religion and they kept the most important stuff secret. But that's all about Demeter and her daughter Persephone and
Yeah.
the cycle of life. And from what we do understand about those traditions is there was a whole long like sort of a process you had to work your way up to, but the climax of it was this ritual where you would go in and take this psychedelic, we presume it to be a psychedelic, some kind of cocktail that they called the kykeon, and
Oh.
you have some kind of experience where you face your own death, and it's all very ritualized and medicinal, but you face your own death, and in doing so, you learn how to live. And so there was a lot of folks who talked about it, like all the most important and famous people in ancient Greece all participated in it. It was really important. And they said, yeah, it's like all about facing your own death. We should have to get more on that, but but yeah, there's very much of it's a very much of a cycle of life tradition.
Oh, so when I was an undergrad, we studied this stuff a lot, and I spent a month in Greece. And when I toured, my history professor, we went to the caves, not really much a cave, where Eleusinian mysteries and Demeter and this abduction, and then Pausanias wrote this guide, what's called a Blue Book Guide to Greece. And he said, I'd love to tell you about it, but I can't. So he partook in it, but it was so secretive that they would kill you, apparently, right, if you reveal the secrets and stuff. So I just remember reading it at one point, and Pausanias like, I'd love to tell you about this, but I can't, and then moving on. It's like, damn. Oh, and then by the way, women, just because all about like women stuff. So women apparently in some parts of Greece, which again wasn't a Greece thing, it was city-states, right? But because the men were off doing their secret stuff, women apparently here and there came up with their own secretive rites, no men allowed, and just as secretive as far as, some historians said, like we just, don't know anything about it because it was a secret thing. So, which I thought was kind of cool, right? Men can do it, so women were like, we're going to do it too. Anyway, that's really cool. All right, that's it. Anyway, thank you. So, I'm learning a lot too, so this is great.
Lisa, did you have something to say?
Yeah, a couple of things. So back, I don't know, 2018, 2019, Michael Pollan, of course, came out with his book, How to Change Your Mind. It was all about psychedelics and, and one of the things that he said that was across the board with them is that, if you take enough, at some point you're going to come to this sort of, threshold moment where you're going to be facing your death. But really it's the death of the ego, but it's the thing that a lot of people, they get worked up, they come to this like threshold, like sort of almost like at the peak of the journey. And that's where the ego death occurs, but how that just made, such a difference for everybody across the board to be able to come to peace with oneness and to like let that go and let that down. But it's my understanding a lot of ancient, of course, one of the things that's missing in our society, except for just very few things, we don't have a lot of initiatory experiences that
nowadays, yeah.
Right, that are ceremonial. I mean, we've got like marriage and like graduation and like death. And I think that's pretty much about it. Maybe divorce, but that's not really like ceremonial.
No, I've noticed that myself with like raising my kids. Like, there's not a lot of these. In secular society, we don't have this stuff.
Still have a coming of age for their kids, but that's one of the things that's absolutely missing from modern society. But a lot of ancient civilizations and tribal societies have all these different kinds of ritualized, ceremonialized kind of initiations. And so to eat of the free or eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or to, drop some mushrooms or whatever it is. And then some of them would be like in a cave or buried like underground, symbolizing death, but then also rebirth, like to be born and to come out of the womb of the mother, which is Mother Earth.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the cave systems, like caves were really central for all these goddess temples. They do all sorts of stuff in caves, and absolutely, it's the womb of Mother Earth, 100%.
Yeah, and
they
then
do that a lot.
When it comes to women's mysteries, like mostly also what we know about so many different ancient and tribal civilizations and the way that they lived, women would come together once a month for a few days, sort of the red tent kind of thing, where women of all ages would gather so that they could share and take care of each other and groom each other, because they were probably all having, menstruation at the same time, and where the older women could pass down wisdom and knowledge to the younger ones and help bring them along, and also talk to them about things like, having sex and how to make things and so on. So that's most likely what was going on in the women's mysteries. But I mean, also, if it's like Greek and Roman, maybe they were also, having sex together and doing that sort of stuff. So I don't think it's quite as mysterious. but when you are the holder of certain kinds of knowledge and wisdom, you don't just share that with anybody, because people have to be initiated into those mysteries. They have to be tested to make sure that they are worthy and that they understand, that they have a reverence for these things.
I just wanted to say, I think about this all the time. I have 4 kids, and my son was in a fraternity. And I won't say what college, because absolutely hazing was alive and well. And it was really interesting. He's my youngest, and I didn't actually object so much, even though there was really intense waterboarding and just absolutely disgusting things. It was like a rites of passage, and they, like, some kids have died from hazing, and a lot of points they felt like they were actually facing their death because it was pretty intense. But the result of that was it was, I guess, trauma bonding. So, like it or not, whether we agree with this or not, it is very alive and well. And he was actually vice president of his fraternity, and his fraternity had just gotten back on campus after COVID because they were expelled from camping for hazing. And then by the time his 3rd year, they were hazing again. And he was like, come on. So his platform for president was to come up with other rites of initiation that didn't include physical abuse. And he lost to a good old boy because he went to a Southern school. And they wanted to keep the traditions alive, just like the fathers before them. And he went to one of the oldest schools in the country. And so it's just wild, the resistance to move away towards a violent sort of rites of initiation. So I think that's such a fascinating conversation about rites of initiation with our young people. And it's really interesting. Yeah.
Can I add just very quickly what Rosalie said? So I went to UNC Chapel Hill. Thank God, no hazing with us, but I will show you. That was and look at the top. There's the qedesha.
Oh yeah, the qedesha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, or we say caduceus, but however you want to. Yeah, caduceus, and then there's but there.
Did they whack you with that paddle?
They didn't, and I can honestly say that we had our secret handshake. We went back to, and I'm not allowed to tell you what, but it made you feel, it's all this initiation stuff, right? And right after it, I told my parents about it, and for us there was no hazing. That I can say honestly, there wasn't. But other fraternities did, and some of it was horrible from what I heard, But it's this whole thing about now you're part of this exclusive, and secret. And it really is not, I'm still not supposed to say what we did, but it's not a big deal. I mean, it's nothing, it's much ado about not a whole lot. But it's still,
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff is just for like social clubs, right? I mean, the fraternity is just a social club,
right?
But other stuff, it's for like esoteric wisdom versus like exoteric wisdom. So like, and you see a lot of different mystery traditions where even the Freemasons have, to a certain extent, a modern mystery tradition where there's an external part that's available to the public that you can see, and you get to see these stories that don't make any sense. But then as you go into get more and more into the organization and earn your way up the ranks, eventually you get led into the esoteric inner wisdom of what the stuff that's really all about. And only certain elected people get a chance to participate and get taught, the true knowledge of the esoteric inner knowledge. And that stuff very much is kept a secret. And it was true that the Elzini mysteries were protected by law. And it was, in fact, a capital punishment if you revealed like the inner workings of that tradition. It was that important culturally. And people, even though it was a mass thing, people really did respect the inner workings of it. They took it quite seriously. I was trying to find this book. There was a book that came out a couple of years ago by this young independent researcher who was proposing that the Kikion was a concoction made from ergot fungus, which was the predecessor to LSD. That's what was synthesized to make LSD, the psychedelic. But ergot is a naturally occurring fungus, and it grows on wheat, and so you get this psychedelic beer going back to the Bronze Age, back to the Neolithic, that people can do. And this is one of those magic mystery potions that people can brew up if you know what you're doing. But yeah, ergot infested beer.
Wow. Wow. I really have to raise a voice and a shout to the song of this kind of tune that we're humming along to. If you would have ever told me, maybe even a day ago or a week ago, that I was going to, for the first time in my holy Catholic upbringing life, would sit on the edge of my seat interested in the scripture readings, and immediately also completely go, how has nobody else ever interpreted it this way?
Yeah.
How is it possible? Like if anybody had even opened a window of that possibility when I was at a younger age, I've been all over this stuff. I've been like, okay, now we're in. What are we doing here? Right, wrong, patriarchal, matriarchal. At least we know what the ball game is across all the dimensions, and not this says, Turtles All the Way Down says this narrative of fictional bloods and wines. But how that got onto the point of fraternal hazing with the secret societies and good protection or bad protection. I mean, like, come on, people. This is primetime television show, right? Am I wrong? Like,
that's great.
Especially with the quality of the guests. I mean, and Ed, he's like a modern day, game show kind of leading us along here, right? Yeah. I think well supplied. So if I'll put a pin on it here to say back to the original narratives, and I love where the secret societies, even my own personal experience with business fraternities, co-ed, ex-wife was a pledge brother. Yeah, if you can even say it that way. So the fact that it's woven around, but in this context that I think you ended with, Ed, which I think is one that just resonates maybe because of the recency, but the whole shepherd and farmer thing.
Yeah.
Ain't that just an interesting, kind of societal paradigm concept, along with, all the other, but that's one that I think then hops the shark, if I could actually put it in true terms, jumps the shark, for anybody who knows Happy Days and the Fonz, because I'm showing my age here, right? So it's a cliche statement to say when something is just impossible and goes from one side to the other, you're jumping the shark. So the fact that we jumped the shark from that shepherd, agrarian, matriarchal, patriarchal concept to the fraternity, secret societies, and the hazing and that's just epic. So thank you for that delightful ride. Who knows what will come next?
I wanted to talk about the serpent a little bit more. my education in university, I double majored in religion and women's studies. And so we got an opportunity to go through a lot of sort of like feminist revision to a lot of different stories and such. But I didn't get this story from being at school. I got this story from, going to all the pagan festivals and meeting up with other people and sitting in women's circles. And so one of the theories is that the first wife of Adam, who was Lilith,
right, yeah,
the one that was made at the same time as Adam in one of the original Genesis stories that John was bringing up. Mm-hmm. So the first wife of Adam, they were made as equal. They were both made from earth. This was Lilith. Lilith had a falling out with Adam and with Yahweh, God, El, whichever it was named, in because I can't keep track of that. But there's a theory, and I think it makes so much sense, that Lilith was the one who she shapeshifted into a serpent. And when she shapeshifted into the serpent, she went into the Garden of Eden to be like, hey, Eve, you're being duped. Eat this fruit. You're being duped. Let me enlighten you, sweetie. So that's like a theory that I think is really worth paying attention to. And I have to grab my cord, so you'll excuse me for just.
So yeah, thanks for bringing up Lilith. That's an important point. And then Rosalie, you had a topic we were supposed to discuss as well. But yeah, just to reiterate.
I just wanted to take a second to introduce you to my pet boa named Charlie.
Okay. Oh, my dog is named Charlie.
Charlie Pets.
So yeah, so Lilith, just to reiterate that, the tradition is Lilith is not mentioned in the Bible, but she is part of Hebrew traditions, and she shows up in Mesopotamian traditions too. She's meant to be the first wife of Adam before Eve, and she was not submissive, and she would want to have sex on sitting on top of Adam, and she wouldn't be submissive to Adam in general. So Adam gives her the boot, and God gives her a new bride that's the newer model, the younger one that's going to be submissive and do what she's told. And Lilith is castigated off to be a demoness or whatever, and torment the dutiful bride or something or other. I don't know. But yeah, so Lilith, that's an important tradition, an important counterpoint to Eve. And again, she's not mentioned. There's no story about Lilith in the Bible. I talk about how the stories are taken away, and because we do have evidence of her from Mesopotamia, so we do know that like the name Lilith and like this sort of demon character Lilith has some pedigree going way back.
Here's the thing, and Ed, the first time I met you, I believe I shared this with you. I understand that what original sin truly is not the coupling of people and sex and lovemaking.
Right.
To me, original sin is when God or the masculine or Adam or whoever you want to point a finger at that's like on the male side of things is when it turned their back on the feminine, on the goddesses, on the women. That to me, that's original sin. And going back to, I believe last week's discussion, we definitely all spoke about the importance of, femininity and feminine wisdom and feminine understanding and feminine ways, and how those things have been broadly missing for, thousands of years in our society. And that if those things were able to be brought back more broadly, that society might not be so fucked up right now.
I love the way you put it. That the turning the back on the feminine was the original sin, and that's such a good inversion on St. Augustine, because St. Augustine, he was like the 3rd century AD, right? He's like 900 years probably after the story was written, 800 or 900 years or something. he comes up with this whole idea that it's the fall of man and original sin is sex, and this whole notion of way we've interpreted the Garden of Eden story ever since comes from St. Augustine, and not from anyone before St. Augustine. He just kind of made that up out of his own head. And because my understanding is that people were kind of baffled by the Garden of Eden story prior to Augustine. His, the generation of that era didn't know what to make of the story. And it was Augustine who came up with this interpretation of original sin and the fall of man. But I love the way you put it there, Lisa. I'm going to start using that that's the original sin is the divorce.
Thank you.
That's good.
Wow.
And then Rosalie, you had a topic about the feminine, about how we, and I think this would be a good way to like finish out the rest of the evening is on this topic is, I mean, you can put it yourself, Rosalie, if you want. But like you were asking about like just our notions of male and female and describing the divine. God,
yeah, that
God.
came from a conversation I had with John last night. I'll just call him out on it. He was, when he kept saying about God, I was like, and the goddess. And he was like, oh, well, for me, God is, genderless. And I was like, So I think that's a great discussion. I mean, for me, divine is the genderless way of describing it. And then otherwise it's God, goddess, and Gus, the great universal spirit. God, goddess, and Gus. That's those are the three. That's my trilogy.
God, goddess, and Gus?
Yeah, the great universal spirit.
Okay. That's fine.
So John, I'd love to hear from John because he's the one. And then Lisa, I know, has some stuff to say about that too.
Yeah. So part of my historical training and background, in my book, I mentioned a quote from Nietzsche, what things are called is incomparably more important than what they are. So names matter, right? What things are called. And we know over time, names and images can change. Like, the crucifix, right, used to be a horrible sign of torture and death. But then depending, give it a few centuries, give it a few millennia, depending, right, things can have a very different context and meaning, like the N word too, who uses it, what context, that sort of thing, right? So for me, I grew up, well, as a little kid, I literally thought Jesus, when I first heard Good Shepherd, I thought he was literally a shepherd. And sheep are literally sheep, because as a little kid, you don't get the sheep are us, and all that kind of stuff. And then for me too, I pictured God because I kept hearing the pronouns he, him, his. God was like Gandalf, right? He had pasty white skin. He looked like, ZZ Top member, the pointy hat, like basically a white wizard. But then over time too, God to me is whatever that is, which I don't know because I'm a human being. And I love physics. I love science. So Carl Sagan back in the day described flatland, right, as length and width, but no depth. And orange comes through flatland. Like it'd be this mind-blowing thing. In a two-dimensional universe, how do you explain a three-dimensional object that comes out of nowhere, is there for a little bit, then disappears, right? Do you tell your flatland friends? Are you going to be locked up by your flatland friends if you tell them? I mean, you'd just be crazy. So for me, God, just that term, it's just like this fuzzy, cloudy, I don't even know what. For me, for different people, I can understand how it could be offensive or it could be limiting, but it so much depends on how a person might define it. So if that causes any offense, I apologize. For me, it's, and I understand small g God. When I think of that, I think of a guy. When I think small g goddess, but my brain then transitions. The big G, when you call it Yahweh, El, whatever. It's just this, what is it, Galatians, right? There's neither male nor female, master or slave, Jew, Gentile, we're all one in Christ, in God's kingdom, whatever that is. And I tell my students too, again, since I don't think I've been dead yet, as far as I know, I feel like there's something there, an energy, a force, whatever it is, that's of course neither male nor female, because that would limit whatever this limitless thing is, whatever that is. And I still, to this day, I'd have to get a beer, another adult beverage, because I don't get infinity. I don't understand how anything can be infinite, because to me, there's got to be a limit, but then if there's a limit, or boundary, what's on the other side of that boundary? And then I just want to get a beer because I can't, it's like flatland, and I can't.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. There's a limit to our brain, what our brains can comprehend.
I can't get it, and I don't.
And I think we have to apply these mental models at a certain point just to like come to grips with things, and then the models work at a cultural level,
But
for a certain period of time until they stop working, and then you got to come up with a new set of mental models.
so I don't know. But for me, that's all that means. And again, apologies if that. I certainly don't want to offend anybody.
I don't
But my
think you
view
said
of
anything
God is, I don't know what I have no idea what it is.
Well described, and I think given individual sovereignty over the choice, as you describe it being your own sovereignty, John. So I think that's cool, and I think the idea of mental models, which start with words and language, is an important one to consider if we are also considering a move from patriarchy to matriarchy. One associated with thought and the other associated with heart. One associated with the practical and the tangible, the other with the emotions and the feelings and the energies. Right? And so I always like to say, what's in the heart of it? Where's the intention? Because I may just meet you for the first time ever, and I don't get a chance to hear that whole definition.
Right.
But I might hear in the lilt of your voice or a little contextual like summary, and then know what's in your heart, know what's in your intention. And I think if we're all looking for that, and that's the move we need to start looking for, is a feeling,
right,
a vibration, not necessarily a model or an explanation. Yeah, that's just what I kind of got from what you were sharing there. Rosalie, John, and Ed, you can't dodge me.
Well, we're coming to an hour. I'll give you my sense of it. When I started,
I'm gonna just
go ahead, Lisa. No, yeah, please.
Yeah, because I have another class. Thank you all so much. I wish I could hang a little bit longer, but after next week, I'm done with this class. So, good night, you guys.
Good night, Lisa. Thank you.
That's the official polite hook, Ed. So you got to make your story short.
Yeah, no, we'll make it quick here, and I think we'll wrap it up. It took me a while when I started learning about the wife of God, and that this was even a concept of the biblical God. It really kind of like hurt my brain for a while to try and make sense of like how that even worked, because, growing up Christian, I was kind of taught that, God is omnipotent and all powerful. So there's no real space and has no partner, right? So there's no space for a wife. But it was a combination of the Native Americans but then ultimately the Hindus. It was where I was able to make sense of it, because the Hindus have all their gods in male-female pairs. And so they have a very well-established philosophy of how it works. And my whole method is now just to map Hinduism to the Bible intellectually. But so for them, God is very clearly immaterial, like thoughts, consciousness. You can't touch thoughts. They're immaterial. Ideas are immaterial. While the goddess is the material world, and she's the sum totality of the material world. And so they always come in pairs, mind-body pairing, and it's like the fabric of reality. Mind and mind and matter. The word mother and the word matter are the same word, or there's the same Latin root. So the mother is the material world, and she's circular, and she's endlessly the cycle of creation and destruction. And so once I was able to put that together, then you realize, oh, God is real, but he's just not omnipotent. He actually there's limits on God, because he has to work within the framework of the mother, who's going to destroy everything he creates ultimately. And so that's why the mother has power and authority of her own and independence of him. And that's just Hindu thinking. That's like Hinduism 101.
No wonder men have such fear of commitment.
I think, again, Ed, you do a strikingly amazing job at like pulling stories and metaphors that we've heard forever out and making real modern day contextual meaning to them.
Well, thanks, Tony. So I guess we'll wrap it up next week. We're going to compare the Cain and Abel, farmer and shepherd, to the Mesopotamian sacred marriage story of Inanna and Dumuzi. Dumuzi being the first of the shepherd kings. And the story is how he the first shepherd king wins over the heart of the goddess and steals her away from her farmer husband. She is already married. Her heart already belongs to the farmer, but the shepherd has to win her over. And then this becomes a sacred marriage between the farmers and the shepherds, which in turn became one of the most important traditions in Mesopotamian culture for the next couple thousand years. And then again, the divorce is a divorce of this sacred marriage. And so Cain and Abel is a farmer and shepherd, and evil. It's a story written by shepherds. All the biblical writers are shepherds. And so in the biblical writer's mind, the shepherds are all the good guys. Shepherds are always the good guys. Farmers are always the bad guys in every story. And once you see that, again, it's all the way through, totally consistent every time. The farmers live in the towns also. It's the townsfolk who are the farmers who are bad folks. They have all the sex. Sodom gets destroyed because they're a bad bunch of town. We'll talk about that. But yeah, shepherds are always a good guy.
Give it all away before we do it.
Ed, just really quickly too. So even modern U.S. history, right? Populists, right? The populist movement, the farmers, bunch of podunks, and then I learned at some point pagan literally means like country dweller, like that.
Yeah, it just means country folks.
Yeah, podunks. You know, what good are farmers? What do they know, right? I mean, and we have to have farmers, right? I mean, without agriculture, anyway. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Good being on with you all again. Have a beautiful night.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure. I appreciate every one of you very much. And
Awesome.
John, I hope to be back. John, I hope you'll be back.
Yeah, no, this is great. I love it. Thank you, Ed, and thanks for all the wisdom. And I learned a lot. I love learning. So
well, please share. And we're trying to get more people on here. It's only it's very organic right now, like only a couple little green shoots. So we would like to, hopefully these, stuff gets traction with a broader audience. So please share it and let's get some other folks involved.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.